especially if you need to talk on your cell phone or if you need to carry on kind of a long conversation. Just keep in mind that we can hear every word you're saying, so you might want to step out from under the dome for everyone's enjoyment. And just this little chair or tree over there is perfect for those needs. Well, you're very lucky this afternoon. You're going to meet two Kentucky Derby winners. This is the only place in the universe, I've checked, the known universe, where you can come and see two Kentucky Derby winners. And the first one we're going to meet, his name is Go For Jin. And he won the Kentucky Derby back in 1994. Now going into that race, he had a lot going for him, not the least of which was a bunch of people around him. Generally speaking, the humans around these horses, we refer to them as their connections, just kind of a shorthand way of talking about them. Well, all of his connections had been to the Kentucky Derby before and had won it. His trainer, Nick Zito, his owner, is a partnership of two New York gentlemen, Condren and Cornacchia. Together in 1991, they brought a horse to the Derby. His name was Strike the Gold, and he won that year. Now, Chris McCarran, who had won previously on Ali Sheba, he was riding Go For Jin for the very first time in a race in the Derby itself. He seemed to have things all under control, that's for sure. Now, Go For Jin, his style is to be a front runner. Horses are individuals too. If you ever watched a race, you may notice that some horses like to maybe stay a little bit off the pace, let the front runners go up there and wait for their time. Others like to stay covered up in the middle, kind of as a middle of the herd kind of thing. Others like to start way back and make one big dramatic sweeping rush at the very end. Well, Go For Jin was pretty much a simple front runner. Once those gates opened, he went right to the front, and he tried to stay there as long as possible. I think that helped him that day because it was raining quite a bit. It turned the track into a real muddy, sloppy mess. I can only imagine if I were a horse running with 19 other horses in the mud, I'd probably do a little bit better if I were in front of them as opposed to behind them. So we're going to pick up his race already in progress. He does win this wire to wire. And one thing to notice is just look at Chris McCarran aboard Go For Jin. I'll give you a little hint, he's like a statue. Now compare that to the jockeys on the horses around him. You'll notice quite a big difference. They're asking the horses to do something, the horses are not responding. And so it's always a good sign when the front runner is just going along as easy as can be. So here is the 1994 Kentucky Derby already in progress.
Soul of the matter on the inside, Smiling, Singing Sam. And on the outside, the middle plate is dropping back a bit. And then the last two horses, Southern Rhythm. And in the back of the pack, Mahogany Hall. The hand at 47 and 1/5 seconds. The phenomenal on the front end. He's three off of it. The leader is Go For Jin. In front, Chris McCarran. About 8 3/4. Wilson second. Alice Gasson. Looking out the outside third. There goes Smiling, Singing Sam. Rushing up on the outside from fourth to second quickly. Round the far turn. Go For Jin leads it. Smiling, Singing Sam. Alice Gasson between horses. Tabasco Cat with the white blinkers. Fourth. Holy Blow on the inside is still fifth. And Bronco is beginning to close ground out in the middle of the racetrack. Bronco is flying along the Stroll Street. Blue and Affair is next. And on the inside, Holy Bull is dropping back. Holy Bull is out of it. He's about ninth at this point. Now they're in the stretch. Go For Jin. Slip from the start. Hands lead. And going off by Chris McCarran. On the inside, Bronco is second.
Look at this. That's a
Right in the middle of the racetrack. And down to the right lane turn. It's Go For Jin. Digging in and holding on. He is going to win the Kentucky Derby.
And let's hear it for Kentucky Derby winner, Go For Jin. Now, Go For Jin is 24 years old. I bet you've already figured that out, knowing, of course, that only 3-year-old thoroughbreds can run in the Kentucky Derby. In fact, when you consider the fact there's about 30,000, give or take 1,000, not that same every year, it varies. About 30,000 thoroughbreds are foaled just in North America each year, and each first Saturday in May, a maximum of 20 3-year-old thoroughbreds actually get to run for the Roses. So that means they have but one chance in their entire lives to get there, much less win the thing. When you consider the odds of just getting a horse there, it really is quite extraordinary. Now, Jin had a great reputation. According to his trainer, Nick Zito, he was one of the most honest horses he'd ever trained. Now, that doesn't mean that, he was never caught telling a lie or he never stole an extra carrot here or there. What it did mean, and it's one of the nicest compliments you can give about a horse, it meant that he was a professional. Every time that gate opened, he just did whatever he could to keep his nose in front of the noses of the horses around him. As simple, and basic, and elementary, and easy to understand, and difficult as that is, race in, race out, consistently. He's nothing if not a very consistent racehorse. Well, on to the Preakness and the Belmont Stakes. He performed gamely in both of those races. Unfortunately, he was beaten by the same horse in both races, a horse named Tabasco Cat. Still, Jin only lost the entire Triple Crown by a combined margin of 2 3/4 lengths. In human time, that's a fraction of a second. So yet again, so close and yet so far. Now, he was a tired horse at the end of his 3-year-old year, as you might imagine. He came back as a 4-year-old, and he almost won his first race back. He was retired midway through his 4-year-old year, though, to come back to his home state of Kentucky, and stand at Claiborne Farm as a thoroughbred sire. His first batch of foals, right off the bat, he showed he was pretty good in that job as well. There was a son, and someone named him Albert the Great, and he went on to more than live up to his name. In fact, he won $3 million on the racetrack, about twice as much as Gopher Jim made when he was out there being a racehorse. And he's now himself, Albert the Great, a very successful sire standing in Pennsylvania. Now, Jim has a great reputation as a sire of good-looking, well-balanced, nimble, athletic, and durable racehorses. Just one kind of dramatic example, one of his daughters, her name's Chicago's Girl, she's raced a total of 117 times in her career. Hopefully she's retired by now, actually. If you have followed thoroughbreds at all, you know some of these names. Of course, Albert the Great, Albertus Maximus, No Biz Like Showbiz, Banrock, Gantry, Carew, Moonshine Mullen, all offspring of Gopher Jim that have gone out there and won stakes races and graded stakes races as well. He also has a great reputation as a broodmare sire. That's just a complicated way to say that his daughters, whether they raced or not, they've gone on to produce some pretty fabulous racehorses as well. Great evidence of what a pro he was. He raced 19 times in his career. It's one of the 19 times those gates opened, he stuck his nose in front. He found himself in the winner's circle 5 times. But get this, he actually hit the board or came in the money 14 of 19 total lifetime starts. He made about $1.4 million as well. He joined us in August of 2011 after spending the last few years of his career as a stud up in Maryland at Bonita Farm, and he's been with us ever since. He's still a stallion, by the way. He's the only stallion you'll meet this afternoon. The rest of the horses we have here are geldings. A gelding is simply a neutered male horse. So let's hear it for Kentucky Derby winner, Gopher Jim. Now that here we are in the middle of a beautiful bluegrass set from Kentucky. Of course, all the champions must be thoroughbreds, but that's certainly not the case. And in fact, right where we are in Lexington, it's almost equidistant. On one side, we have Keeneland Racetrack. That's where you find thoroughbreds. On the other side, though, is the Red Mile, and that's where you find standardbreds racing. Our next champion, his name is Mr. Muscleman. He's a standardbred trotter. Standardbreds are harness horses because they wear a harness, and they pull behind them a driver. That driver sits in a little 2-wheeled cart. We used to call them sulkies. Now, for some reason, they prefer the term bike, so we'll go with that. And of course, the driver sits back there. It's his job to help direct that horse through traffic, and also to tell him when to really pour on the power. The one big difference between harness racing and the kind of racing where a jockey sits on top of a horse in a saddle is that if you're a standardbred trotter, you must trot that entire race. It's a little bit more complicated. We get into the particulars, but basically speaking, they must trot. If they break that gait, they go into, say, a canter or a gallop, the way that thoroughbreds race, they pretty much lost the race. So the driver, it's part art, part science. You want to ask him for all he's got, but not too soon or not too hard, because he may break out of that gait. There's another kind of standardbred named, called a pacer, and we'll meet one of those next. But basically a trot is what we call a diagonal gait. So when horses go to trot, imagine you had 4 legs, you'd move your right front and your left hind as if they were attached. So legs on opposite corners move up and back together, and obviously the other diagonal as well, otherwise you'd fall over. Mr. Muscleman was actually a very beloved horse up at the Meadowlands racetrack in New Jersey. When they heard he was being retired, they put together a really nice video. It gives a good overview of where he came from, what he did out there, and why he meant so much to people.
Mr. Muscleman was not only a bargain basement yearling who went from rags to riches. This trotter was a story of perseverance and consistency. The son of Muscles Yankee retires at the age of 10 as the richest son of Muscles Yankee, and he's among the top 10 money-earning trotters of all time with $3.6 million. Known for his long, loping stride and wicked kick and charismatic presence on the racetrack, Mr. Muscleman won 37 of 67 career starts and took a mark of 151-1 at Woodbine. Bred by Spar J Stables and Brinkney Farms, he sold for a mere $2,000 as a yearling at Tattersall's in 2000. Owned by Adam Victor and Sons Stable, trained by Noel Daly, and driven by Hall of Famer Ron Pierce, Mr. Muscleman really blossomed late in his 3-year-old season, winning the Canadian Trotting Classic, Kentucky Futurity, and Breeders' Crown at the Big M to seal his first of 3 straight division championships. In the Breeders' Crown, this time Hamiltonian champion Amigo Hall was a victim, as Mr. Muscleman dominated in 154-4. Mr. Muscleman went on to also win his division at ages 4 and 5, while being voted overall Trotter of the Year in 2005. His 5-year-old campaign was his best ever when he captured the Cutler Memorial, Titan Cup, Trotting Classic Final, Breeders' Crown, and second straight Maple Leaf Trot en route to his second $1 million season. He stormed home in the slump in 27 3/5 to capture the Cutler Final in 154 3. He dominated the Titan Cup in a sparkling 151 3. He proved his staying power in the Trotting Classic Final at the Big M. And he went all the way in the Breeders' Crown at Mohawk in 152 flat. Unfortunately, injuries limited Mr. Muscleman to just 11 more starts over the next 3 years. In 2007, he launched a gallant comeback to the top level, shipped overseas, and finished second in Sweden's Elite Law, a proud American representation. He won his final career start at the Big M on June 22nd, 2007, a fitting swan.
And let's hear it for Mr. Muscleman. 15 years old. If you happen to catch it up there, he was sold for only $2,000 as a yearling. Within that same year, he was purchased by his current owners, Adam Victor and Son Stable, for $180,000. So someone made a nice little $178,000 profit in a couple months there. I guess it's great if you can get it. Now, like with as is the case with many standardbreds, of course, they're all individuals, but generally speaking, they tend to grow into their abilities, get a little bit better as they get faster, as they get older. In fact, that was the case with Mr. Muscleman. As a 5-year-old, that's the year he won Trotter of the Year, and he also set 2 new track records at 2 different tracks, or fine-boned as thoroughbreds, that's for sure. But they also tend to be a little bit less hot-blooded. In fact, they make great horses when they're done racing. The Amish folks have picked this up. If you spend any time in those areas and you pass those big black carriages out in the road, 9 times out of 10, there's a standardbred pulling that carriage that's right off the racetrack. They're used in such things as trail riding. I've seen them in hunter jumpers, dressage, you name it. Even Civil War reenactors have gone to the standardbred, off-track standardbreds because they're used to all sorts of distractions around them. They're used to wearing all sorts of weird equipment. And, what are a couple of cannonballs or rifle shots when you've actually competed up at the Meadowlands racetrack in New Jersey, right? Certainly pretty much similar up there, that's for sure. Now, when he retired as the 9th richest standardbred in history. He made $3.6 million, but the fact that really even floors me even now is he only got to race 67 times. Now, as you'll see, that's a little bit on the low side for standardbreds these days, but he really tried to make every race count because he found himself in the winner's circle 37 of those 67 times. And he's been with us, in fact, since August of 2009. We also call him our gentle giant. He's a tall horse. He stands over 17 hands tall. A hand, by the way, is just the standard unit of measure. We use that term just like some people use the term foot. It goes back to the days before people carried measuring tools and instruments with them. If they wanted to somehow be able to communicate the height of a horse, they take their hand and they use a flat hand in this fashion, hand over hand, sometimes fist over fist. Now, it never matters how long a horse's ears are, how long their neck is, how long their tail is. None of that factors into their actual height. The only thing that matters is the distance from the ground to the highest point on their withers, and Paul's pointing to the withers there. All horses have them. Some are more obvious than others, but it's a bone that they all do have. So let's hear it for Mr. Muscleman. All right, well, our next champion, his name is Won the West, and he's a standardbred pacer, the other side of the coin, compared to a trotter. A pace is actually a lateral gait. When horses go to pace, they move both right legs, both left, both right, both left. Now, they are faster than trotters by at least a second, sometimes more in some cases, so they never mix together in races. It's always segregated trotters against trotters and pacers against pacers. Now, Won the West was known especially for having a wicked kick in his races. In the third clip we're about to watch, see if you can pick him up as they come around that final turn. He's the horse in the first bunch of horses, about 4 or 5 of them. Look all the way to the left, or the outside part of the track. That is him. And every time I watch this, I'm amazed that he wins, because it looks impossible. So here's exactly what I'm talking about, some great highlights from the career of Won the West.
Play after artificial. Won the West looking for a gargantuan upset on the inside. In deep stretch, here comes Won the West and Shadow Play way up wide. Won the West and Jim Morrow Jr. with the drive of a lifetime. It's Won the West at 15-1.
With an eighth of a mile to go. Always a virgin. Kicks off cover. He is charging hard. Hot Rod Mindale up the rail. Won the West is in between horses. Won the West is coming through for Greg Grismore. And Won the West upsets in the Tattersall.
The inside kinetic Yankee right there on the outside as artist view. Here comes Won the West. He's alive, 3 wide for the drive. Down the stretch they come in the preview. And with the lead, bring him down. It's kinetic Yankee. Won the West on the far outside. And here he comes. Greg
to the top of the stretch. They turn for home. Foiled again. Has the lead now by a length and a half. Foiled again. Won the West on the outside. Still coming. Foiled again. Won the West on the outside. Here's the wire. Won the West. Get up.
Now the West is coming on, and it's Won the West screening through at the inside. A huge opening at the rail, and Won the West took full advantage of it. Won the West not only won the West, but he's won the Canadian Pacer.
And let's hear for two-time Pacer of the Year, Won the West. Won the West, sometimes called W around here. He's the youngest horse we have here up at the Hall of Champions. He's 11. He's also our newest. He joined us in the fall of 2012. Well, don't let that fool you, though, his young age. He's actually a very accomplished and very experienced racehorse. He actually raced 109 times in his career. He found himself in the winner's circle 36 times. He came in second 24 times and third 15 times. All that adds up to the fact you're looking at one of the richest pacers in history. In fact, when he did retire, he retired third overall in money earnings. He made just a little under $4 million in his career. And one of the races we just saw, he beat a horse named Foiled Again. Back at that time, they were actually stablemates, meaning they were actually trained by the same trainer. And he had Foiled Again would kind of go back and forth. One would win, and the other would win. Foiled Again is still racing, as a matter of fact. He's 11 years old himself. He's going to be 12 in January. And that horse has just surpassed the overall, record ever. He's made over $6 million out there on that racetrack, which shows that, of course, Won the West was not racing in slouches out there. That's for sure. Now, he's a horse who actually went out there and, as a youngster, did pretty good. And he, again, got a little bit better as he got older. He twice won the Dan Patch Award for Older Pacer of the Year. He twice won the Breeders' Crown Open Pace. And he's a New Jersey bred. Whenever you hear that, this state bred, that state bred, it just means he was born in that particular state. There's a lot of pride built up in that, a lot of breeders' incentives. And I'm sure that made his people very happy when back in August of 2009, he actually paced one of the fastest miles ever recorded. His final time was 1 minute 47 seconds. Now compare that to the 1:51 you heard these very enthusiastic harness race callers crowing about. Last time I checked, that's 4 whole seconds. That's a lot faster than 1:51. It's almost hard to believe, as a matter of fact. Now, he was twice awarded a Pacer of the Year. That happened in 2009 and in 2010. So let's hear it for two-time Pacer of the Year, Won the West. Well, our next champion, Funny Cide, he has a story full of pretty much a remarkable first. He was the first New York bred to win the Kentucky Derby, the first gelding to get that done in 74 years. For his trainer, Barclay Tabb, he was his first Kentucky Derby horse, period. Then, of course, his first Kentucky Derby winner and first Preakness winner. And it goes on, his owners were just a bunch of regular guys. They loved going to the racetrack together. They loved handicapping. They loved betting. They especially liked winning money, as you might imagine. And they decided, hey, you know what? Let's pool our finances. Let's buy ourselves a horse. Let's get some skin in the game. So they came up with $75,000. They end up getting Funny Cide, their first horse ever, who almost wins the Triple Crown. So we're going to share with you 3 clips from his career. Of course, in 2003, he won the Derby and the Preakness. Now, he did not win the Belmont Stakes, otherwise he'd be a Triple Crown winner. He's still a little sore on that subject, so we're not going to show him losing that race here. That would be ridiculous. Instead, what we're going to show is a race at Belmont Park. It's been over a year since he lost the Triple Crown there. And coming into this year, he's a little bit older than a 4-year-old. And, some of the gloss had, I guess, dulled on him. Race fans can be very fickle. The hot horse one day, not so hot the next. That was sort of the situation coming into this race. It's a Grade 1 race, which means, it's as good as far as money goes and talent and the competition as the Triple Crown races, more or less. It's called the Jockey Club Gold Cup. And even halfway through, if you listen, you can hear the incredibly good race announcer Tom Durkin say, Funny Cide is stopping. Now that never means what it sounds like. You don't take that literally. It's sort of shorthand. It means what it looks like. He's thrown in the towel. He's done. He's not going to be a factor anymore in this race. What happens at the end of that race, though, reminds everyone of why we call him the Gutsy Gelding.
And they're off in the Kentucky Derby. They're on the outside. They're coming down to the final furlong. And the Gutsy Gelding, Funny Cide, has a narrow lead. Bobby Frankel's Derby duo, Peace Walls to his inside. Empire Maker's giving it all. Funny Cide trying to pull up the upset here. 12 to 1 coming down to the line. And the Gutsy Gelding, Funny Cide, has won the 129th Kentucky Derby. And the race is on as they approach the top of the stretch here at Pimlico. The field turns for home, and Funny Cide comes roaring off the turn with the lead. Funny Cide has repelled Peace Rolls, and it's Scrimshaw on the outside, and he's now ready comes the Cliff's Edge. And the Cliff's Edge is a rallying fourth on the far turn. Funny Cide is stopping. It's Newfoundland now going head-to-head with Little Money. Newfoundland on the outside, Little Money at the rail. Funny Cide under a drive, but he's now back third toward the inside. And the Cliff's Edge is now fourth. And farther back, Evening Attire, he's still 6 lengths behind. Newfoundland comes up the turn with the lead. Newfoundland in front. But here comes the momentum of the Cliff's Edge on the outside. And Funny Cide, who dropped back to third on the far turn, is coming again down to the final 16. Newfoundland, Funny Cide fights his way to the lead. The gutsy gelding, indeed. Funny Cide has won.
And let's hear it for our gutsy gelding, Funny Cide. Well, Funny Cide is 15 years old. He's a beautiful colored chestnut, of course. And of course, his big story all revolves around his time during the Triple Crown back in 2003. And after winning the first two jewels, the Derby and the Preakness, he made a triumphant return to his home state of New York for the Belmont, and a record crowd turned out. Over 100,000 people showed up. And pretty much everyone there would have told you they knew they were there to witness history. They were there to see their hometown hero win the Triple Crown. Well, as we all know, it didn't quite work out that way. But for many of the same reasons, it had only worked out 11 times in history before him, and only once and quite recently since. Go American Pharoah. For one thing, remember, these are 3-year-old horses. It's the only age that can actually ever compete in any of these 3 races, known as the Triple Crown. Their usual schedule, if they were not competing in the Triple Crown, would be, maybe 1 race every 4 to 5 weeks or so. Triple Crown horses have to run 3 long, grueling, pressure-packed, eyes of the world are upon you kind of races in just 5 weeks' time. Right off the bat, that's a very tall order, as we say. Now they issued the Belmont Stakes at 1.5 miles, coming as the 3rd leg in the Triple Crown. It's the longest they've ever been asked to race in their life. And it's considered a marathon distance these days when we talk about thoroughbreds. The phrase you hear a lot, what breeders are breeding for, what buyers want to buy, is precocious speed. That means that here in America especially, we like our thoroughbreds very, very fast when they're very, very young. Of course, you don't get the ability for that horse to kind of grow into stamina if that's pretty much how he's bred to be. He was actually beaten in that race by a very important horse, a horse named Empire Maker. Turns out that Funny Cide lost the entire Triple Crown by no more than 5 lengths, which equals about 1 second in actual time. Empire Maker won. Since then, Empire Maker went on to continually actually ratchet up his importance as well. You'll find Empire Maker in the pedigree of American Pharoah, by the way. I don't know how that makes Funny Cide feel about that. Of course, after the Triple Crown, because he's a gelding, which means he can't reproduce, he's a neutered male horse, that means that there's no second career for him to rush off stage to do. He kept racing. Geldings are literally and figuratively the workhorses of racing. If not for them, we'd have maybe, 3 or 4 racetracks in the entire country. These are the horses that fill up the race cards every day, all the races that lead up to the big stakes race in the afternoon. He actually raced 30 more times before retirement. He hit the board 15 times, and he actually won 3 graded stakes, which is good. It showed he was still, competing at the top of his game. When it was time for retirement, he had such a huge fan base, especially in upstate New York. Everyone wanted to see him go out a winner, win the final race of his career. They also wanted to celebrate, what a great run it was. So at a Finger Lakes racetrack in upstate New York, Funny Cide did win. He followed the script this time. He won the last race of his career, and he got to, gallop off into the sunset. He did not come directly here. For a couple seasons off and on, his connections, especially Barkley Tag, his trainer, they put him to work, or he was volunteered to be a stable pony around the barn in the morning. He'd act as transportation for the trainers as they went out to observe other horses that were in training. When he did join us in 2008, he brought with him a record of 38 starts, 11 firsts, 6 seconds, and 8 thirds, and earnings of about $3.6 million. Now, perhaps the biggest impact he made, and it's actually still being felt today, is on the hearts and minds of all of the race fans out there who never considered that, geez, maybe someday I can own a racehorse, or at least a percentage of a racehorse. And nowadays, you can't spend a day at the racetrack or watch a day of racing on TV without seeing at least once, down in that winner's circle, the usual suspects, the horse, the trainer, the jockey, and about 50 other people all crammed in for that photo. Well, they're there, most likely, because they're all owners of that horse. Funny Cide's beautiful chestnut color, as we say. He's a very smart horse, too. A little bit of sense of humor at some points, which makes sense, since his name is Funny Cide. So let's hear it for 2003 Derby and Preakness winner, Funny Cide.